Hello and welcome to DAWG Days, where we talk about all things cannabis. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Holly B. Today is a very special day here in the Doghouse. Our guest is Emmy award-winning talk show host, who is currently the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the executive producer of Weed Talk News. Joining us from New England, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jimmy Young to the show. I know, I need to get some of those, don't I?
That's a smattering of applause. Happy to share, And by the way, I spelled cannabis wrong on Pro Cannabis Media on my intro, so you get to either do some post-production or just ignore it.
That's okay. I have it splattered all over on a ticker and banners and stuff, so I think we got it covered.
That's cool. No worries. All good, and it's good to see you. And thank you for your service, by the way. I know your background, too.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. That's really cool. That's awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. You are like a godfather of podcasting. Welcome to Amateur Hour here.
I don't think anybody. Wait, hang on
me.
I don't think anybody has ever called me the godfather of podcasting before. So congratulations on that. I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. It also makes me feel extremely old, which I'm comfortable with.
I didn't want to go there, but you have a very impressive resume. When Steve sent me your bio, I was there like, oh my goodness, I'm just a little bit nervous, just a little bit.
Don't be nervous, please. Please. And you know what they say in this industry, and I'm talking about the hosting media type industry. You are your toughest critic, and I'm going to be your biggest fan. Okay.
Oh.
And I still look at myself and do not like how I sound. Do not like how I talk way too much. But you know what? At this point in my life, I'm stubborn. I'm not going to change.
I totally feel you on that one. So do you want to start at the very, very beginning? How did you get into this field? You were a broadcaster. What did you get your Emmy for? I'm full of all kinds of questions.
Well, you're the host. I want you to ask the question, and hopefully I won't pontificate and set it up with like a 5-minute setup. I'll just answer your questions. So you tell me where you want me to begin, because it's a very long story. When you get old, your stories get longer and longer. Okay.
And they kind of branch off too. They kind of go this direction and then this direction, but it comes back eventually. And there is a moral to the story at the end of it all, usually. Okay. At least with me, there is. Well, I tell you what, on a journey.
I was going to say, at the end of this, you get to tell me what that moral is, okay? Because I'm still looking for it, all right?
Awesome. So you have 40 years of experience in commercial television and radio. How did you get started?
Well, I was an athlete once, I swear to God. And like many athletes, especially that actually lived to be the 67 years that I've lived on this earth, we all break down at some point. My breakdown started at age 42, and I've had 5 surgeries since then. But how did it all start? Okay. Well, I mean, if you really want my athletic career, I was a decent soccer player, and I coached for 35 years. I also played baseball and whatever other sport was in season. In other words, I got to play golf and I got to play tennis. And if it was baseball season, if it was basketball season, whatever. That being said, when I ripped up my ankle my second time in 5 years, when I was 19, a friend of mine who started Tufts University Television, and Tufts University is my alma mater. It's a very nice university, small school out of Boston, outside of Boston, which is my area of hometown. My hometown's Newton, which is a very nice suburb outside of Boston as well. And my friend Tony came up to me and said, well, you're not going to play this year. And I went, yeah, I know. I got hurt again. What are you going to do with all your time? And I told him, I said, I really have no idea. And he says, well, how'd you like to produce sports in Boston at the NBC affiliate, WBZ TV4? And I went, I don't know anything about television production. And then he basically said one sentence that changed my life. You get college credit for watching sports on TV. And I went, ooh, sign me up for that. I like that gig. You know, I thought I'd be a teacher and a coach when I got to college. That's what I wanted to be. They were the most influential people in my life at that time. And then before I knew it, within 3 or 4 weeks, I was producing sports for a network affiliate in Boston in a major market. and realized I had a skill, a gift of gab, if you will, and also the ability to identify what the highlights are of a sporting event. After I've watched it for 2.5, 3 hours, I got to pick 4 or 5 plays every game. And that was the highlight package that my mentor, my anchor, Jimmy Myers, who was the first African-American sportscaster in Boston, he and I became really good friends. And by the way, still friends to this day. And trust me when I tell you, there is a show called The Jimmys, Twin Brothers, Different Mothers, that is available on YouTube. You got to go look for it. We did it, I want to say, God, I can't even remember, probably 10 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago, out of a bar outside of Boston. And it was just a lot of fun to work with the guy that really influenced your life and career, certainly at the beginning. And we all, if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in the industry a long time, we all have these mentors. We all have these models, role models that we've worked with and have influenced us. And to this day, Jimmy Myers remains a good friend and a mentor. That's awesome. How it all started. You asked. I'm sorry it took 5 minutes to tell you that, but it's a decent story, and I like to tell stories.
I love that. That's a beautiful story. And Massachusetts, what a gorgeous place, right? I mean, you get some terrible winters or whatever, but
well, you are familiar with the fact that the climate has changed, right?
Climate change. How has climate change affect Massachusetts?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's say when I was growing up in Massachusetts, we used to get 3 feet of snow by December, and it would last until March. And now we don't get snow as much like that anymore. You know,
really?
It's like maybe 1 or 2 storms, maybe 6 to 8 inches a storm. I mean, that's nothing. And I have an all-wheel drive car, and I feel like I'm it's a waste because I don't need all-wheel drive in 6 inches of snow. And yes, people in New England actually know how to drive in the snow, and you just go really slow, by the way. So, the winters are as easy as they've ever been. Don't forget, maybe you haven't read my bio, but I lived in Portland, Maine for 11 years. And that's an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Boston on the coast. And in a lot of ways, Portland, Maine is a mini Boston because it's a harbor town on the ocean. But Portland's much smaller, obviously, than Boston. But it was a great experience working at the CBS affiliate in Portland, Maine for 11 years from 1981 to 1992.
Wow, super cool. That's really super cool. So now you are currently the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and you're the executive producer of Weed Talk News. And that's kind of how we got introduced through the Citizen Green Weed TV connection. So I'm just kind of getting my feet wet, brand new to the scene. And I'm coming from Military Broadcast Radio. I was with them for a couple of months and got this opportunity. And now I'm over with Whiskey and Weed, or Weed and Whiskey TV. So new to the scenes. It's so far, everybody has been way super cool. And Steve's kind of made the introductions to the different shows and whatnot. And everybody's like super cool. So
did you meet the J-Man? Have you been on with Jerry?
I have not, and I've asked. So maybe it's summertime and it's busy, and my people will call you because I don't have people. So
that's what people say. Well, what about your staff? And I go, you're the staff of me, myself, and I. Yeah, I have staff meetings all the time.
That is a question that I had because whenever I was at Military Broadcast Radio, they're like, Holly, that professional podcasts have teams of people, and I'm there like, it's just me, and if I can grab my son to be my sound guy, that's a luxury. So and is that true that like professional podcasts have like a team usually working with them? No.
No. Here's the thing about, first of all, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
What's a podcast? I didn't know what it was in 2018 when I had started my first one. I was encouraged to do a cannabis podcast by a friend, Nick Gelso from the CLNS Media Network. They were a podcast network. And to me, and he explained it to me, a podcast is an audio file, an MP3 file for those that are digitally inclined, if you will. Okay. I don't believe in that. I believe in I'm a television producer. I grew up in television, and I bonded with the J-Man, Weed and Whiskey TV's Jerry Joyner, because we both agreed if it looks like TV, produced like TV, it's TV. It's just called something different now and distributed differently, i.e., over the internet, online, as opposed to over the air. And please do not get, well, if you really want to see me get upset, we can talk about social media, which I despise. It's censorship. It's horror. And how they've treated the cannabis industry, they should be ashamed of themselves as they count their money. Okay. So, but let's keep talking about one of my favorite subjects, me. So go ahead, ask me anything else you want to know.
I don't want to upset you too much, but I just want to kind of applaud you and also agree with you about social media. And when it comes to cannabis, I have several accounts. I've met some friends in the cannabis industry, and they are really talented people, but they're not getting the amount of likes, and it's almost like they call it shadow banned. Mm-hmm. And it's such a shame because they're really talented people who are really awesome advocates, and they're just not getting the exposure. And I know they have to be getting shadow banned. I know they have to be.
So call it censorship, because that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay? Yes, exactly.
And Congress gave social media companies the keys to the asylum by allowing them to police themselves, as opposed to every other broadcast media outlet in the world, in United States world anyway, that has to apply for a license to have access to the masses over the air or now online. And the fact that they don't have to do that is, look, it's killing my old friends in traditional media. Audiences have declined pathetically. Local news is disappearing. People are listening to what they want to hear to support their own opinions, because they can find something created by a consumer somewhere that supports what they already think they know, as opposed to, why don't you learn about other people's opinions and see if we can find common ground?
Yes, absolutely. I know on whenever I was over with military broadcast radio, it was our shows. We were a bunch of disabled veterans, so we curse and we swear and we tell off-color jokes, and we're pretty gritty. I'm not that gritty. I'm actually pretty vanilla compared to what some of the other guys and gals were doing. It was nothing for them to be kicked off of TikTok, kicked off of YouTube. Oh, my account just got suspended on Facebook. And so they couldn't, those were their outlets for their shows. So how is that not censorship?
It is censorship, and it's a shame. But what you're describing is called shock jocks, show hosts. And for years, some of the biggest names in podcasting, talk shows, I'm talking about Howard Stern, Imus, Steak Shapiro, Joe Rogan, who by the way, went to the same high school as me. Everybody knows who Joe Rogan is. Nobody knows who the freak I am, but that's okay. It's okay. And they know that personalities and opinions drive attention. Human behavior. We're all about rubbernecking. Oh, look what just happened. Let me tell you what I just saw. That's a human behavior. And people that are smart enough to know how to market it and use it and take advantage of it have done quite well in the media industry. But you're 100% correct talking about some of the others that have been, whether it's shadow banned or censored or brought down or taken down. And here's a quick little anecdote. I started with one podcast because I wasn't quite sure what the hell a podcast was. Oh, I'm going to do an interview with somebody. I can do that. Where's my cassette recorder? These are the things that I was thinking, because those were the days when I'd walk around with a microphone and I'd get the interviews on my cassette recorder when I was learning the craft, if you will, at age 19, 20, 21 kind of a thing. And sure enough, now it's a completely different animal. And, but It all started at the New England Cannabis Convention in March of 2018. I walked in, there was over 400 vendors there. I walked in, literally was the first cannabis event I'd ever attended, including all the open, whether it's they called it the Freedom Rally in Massachusetts for a long time, the Cannabis Parade, the Hash Bash in Michigan. I mean, there's been quite a few over the years that have survived. It started as an act of civil disobedience to bring attention to the fact that there were, plenty of people out there using this plant medicine responsibly, somewhat sometimes irresponsibly, but responsibly enough. And they wanted to showcase the fact that they could actually gather, enjoy themselves, learn, hang out, and not cause any trouble, as opposed to other events that have plenty of alcohol flowing and everybody accepts it and gets drunk and stupid and gets into fights. So I've never been to one of those cannabis events before. And I looked around and I went, holy mackerel, this is a big business. I had no idea. No idea. Now you got to understand, Massachusetts had an adult use ballot question in 2016 that passed. The medical program started in 2013 and that passed. And within a week, I had myself a medical card because all I had to do was walk into the doctor's office and go, this is going to gross you out, but look at my hands. Okay. I've got arthritis throughout my hands. And I said, that's just my hands. Okay. And, that was pretty much got me my card because I said, I live in chronic pain. It's part of my life.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it was, that started that medicinal voyage, legal medicinal voyage, if you will. Admittedly, if anybody ever watches my shows, know I'm very open about the fact that I started when I was 14 years old in 1971, which happens to coincide with the origin of the Waldos. Now, do you know who the Waldos are?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's why I like Office Hours with Professor Jimmy, because I have so much information right now in my brain about cannabis. I can't help but spew. Did you know?
Bring it.
The Waldos was a group of high school seniors at San Rafael High School in California in 1971, who used to meet at 4:20 after school at the Louis Pasteur statue, which happened to be across the street from the high school, to meet and catch a buzz. Because
Nice.
after all, they were 17, 18-year-olds from California, and that's just what they did. Now, I happen to be on the other side of the country in Massachusetts in 8th grade at age 14 in 1971. But a guy who moved in from New York, I'm going to blame the New Yorkers for everything, decided to share with me his little pipe and whatever else he had in his pipe at the time. And I went, oh, this is kind of cool. And you got to understand, I grew up when the drinking age was 18 in Massachusetts. And maybe not in 8th grade, but certainly by 9th grade, we were drinking beer. And I couldn't drink more than 3 beers without getting sick. Now, it took me another 20 years to figure out that I was allergic to hops. However, because I was getting sick on 3 beers, I was looking for another way to put my brain in an altered state of consciousness, i.e., hey, I like that cannabis stuff, or weed, or herb, or pot, or grass, or whatever the hell we called it back then. And I said, okay, this is cool. And then I found out that I could actually hyper focus under the influence. And being ADHD, again, diagnosed later in life, nobody knew what ADHD was in the 70s. Trust me. Yeah. It's boys being boys. Girls, you're on your own. But boys being boys meant something. And it meant we couldn't focus, concentrate. We were always upsetting and being the class clown and all that. Well, hello. And I guess I was born with the gift of gab, because I always managed to either talk my way in or out of trouble. So that was my life. That's how I got involved with it. And now you know the origin of 420.
I love it.
Police picked
I love those little nuggets of knowledge. I love it.
I'm filled with nuggets, that's for sure. People say I'm filled with something else too, but I don't like to use 4-letter words. But interesting enough, the police picked up the fact that 420 was public consumption of cannabis. So that was their code. There's 420 going on at the corner of Vine and Court Street. Check it out. Kind of a thing. And that's how that was sustained. And then, of course, one of the Waldos was friends with the Grateful Dead, one of the members of the Grateful Dead. And the Dead,
Small world.
being who they were, part of the San Francisco sound of the 60s, a great cult rock and roll band to this day. I listen to them. In fact, I think I just heard Friend of the Devil on my playlist. So, that's how that got picked up. And of course, once the Dead got it going, that's how it evolved through the culture, the industry. And now it's a celebratory holiday in April every year. I think it's a riot. And also, 4:20 in the afternoon seems to be a good time to catch a buzz right before 5 o'clock, which was quitting time. So when you quit, you at least were under the influence. And that's the story of 4:20 and the Waldos. So there you go. Happy to share that with your audience, Holly. Happy to.
I'm so glad you did. That was freaking awesome.
What else you want to know?
This is going to be a classic episode that I, might go my reach to if I have to take a radio day or something. Just play that Jimmy Young one. I mean, that will enlighten everyone.
There you go. And you use StreamYard, I noticed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk afterwards. Go ahead. Keep going. Okay. I know we have a way to play together.
I do have a co-host that comes on. He is a dispensary owner, and he put together a little ad. So I'm going to run his ad real quick, and we'll come right back and pick up the conversation.
I love ads.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Ethereal Gold Dispensary, the best kept secret around. Legal cannabis, mushrooms, and more, straight to your doorstep. Each product is meticulously tested, setting the ethereal gold standard nationwide. And we're not just in it for the greenbacks, folks. We honor our troops and veterans with a special discount. Plus, 2% of every purchase goes to local charities. Visit etherealgolddispensary.com and use the code RADIOHIGH for 15% off. Enjoy yourselves, my friends.
And we're back with Mr. Jimmy Young, the award-winning TV talk show host, throwing around his nugs, and we're taking them gratefully.
That's cool. Hey, I want to meet that dude, Ethereal Cannabis. I love the 2% identified to charities. So that's called socially responsible capitalism. And it is something that I would like to see more people in the industry embrace. I'd like to see more people in the industry embrace environmentally generated heating elements, lighting elements, whatever it takes to preserve the environment. Because as we know, God put this plant on Earth for a number of reasons, and we're just now trying to figure out how we can, use those reasons and make a buck and survive at the same time and help others. It's a great opportunity, great industry filled with great people. The anecdotal evidence about this plant is overwhelming. And, I've done over 600 interviews, Holly, in 4 years. So there's a lot of knowledge up here and a lot of stories. And we don't even have to get into the stories about when I was a sportscaster, because those are some really good ones too. But let's focus on the cannabis side, shall we?
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, Bill Fuchs is the owner of that dispensary that we just ran the ad for. He is in Waukesha, Wisconsin. He does hemp-derived products, and he has something that he's kind of established himself. He's put his own kind of gold standard on the products that he brings in and sells in his dispensary. And he is very, let's see, what's the word? I don't want to say snobbery, but he has a very high, standard of what he will provide to the public and his customers and that sort of thing. Another cool thing about him is he had, as far as accessibility goes, which is kind of important, that folks have readily accessible to their medicines, is he has kiosks. And so he has a kiosk in his like little breezeway of his dispensary, so people can just walk in 24/7 and dial in their medicine, pay for it, and nobody has to be there. It's pretty cool. And I think he has a kiosk in his local mall as well, so people could just go up there and dial up a THC drink and keep going.
Yeah,
It's genius.
Do you want to hear my opinion about Wisconsin and
I do.
Delta 8?
Yes.
No disrespect to the man. He's a smart guy. He's an entrepreneur. He's taking advantage of the system, which is brilliant, which he has every right in a free society to do.
Yes.
However,
no,
there's a big however here. And it's not really reflective on him or the others that are out there doing Delta 8 products.
Sure.
The idiots in our government that basically legalized cannabis sativa, the plant, with the Farm Bill in 2018, shows you they had no clue what the hell they were doing. Yes. No idea. And I'm not going to point fingers and make this a political discussion. It has more to do with the type of person that is more concerned about their own backside. Mm-hmm. Their own, and they espouse, but we're worried about the kids and public safety. That is such BS. And again, it's what our political system is made of, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And again, love it or leave it. I get it. We're still, trying to figure out this country and how it will ever survive as a free society. It's not easy. It's just not easy because human behavior, always looking for the shortcut. Always looking for the loophole, always looking for a way to make a quick buck instead of the right buck.
Yeah.
And while overall the intent of regulating and legalizing adult use cannabis is still the goal, they, once again, our elected officials and our government are doing a great job of making it as difficult as possible for anyone to invest, get a return on their investment, and actually stay in business in the regulated cannabis THC Delta 9 world.
Yes.
So if they haven't learned their freaking lesson yet about this plant, they need to. And it boggles my mind. I can't imagine what the lobbyists in Washington, D.C., I know quite a few of them, but I just don't know how they get through their day because it would frustrate me beyond to sit across the table or running down somebody in the hallway and talking to them about this product. And they immediately go back to, Reefer Madness days. I get some stuff that I found out about how prohibition started, why it started, and why it had been vilified and who was behind all of that. That is beyond fascinating to me. Happy to share it with your audience if you want it, but it is amazing to me now that I've learned so much. And I was a history major. Old news, what a shock, right? People ask me, what'd you major in college? Old news. What do you mean old news? History, because today's news is tomorrow's history. I grew up in newsrooms, TV newsrooms since I was 20 years old. Okay. Yeah. So that's, and we do everything quick and dirty, short and sweet, say as much as possible in as few words as possible, which for a talk show host was a real challenge when I had to switch over to being broadcast journalist, news person, if you will, news sports stories. But it is an amazing, it's amazing to be part of a historic time. That's how I view this. My original vision when I started doing my own little podcast was, you know what? I'm not the only one who can do this. There's lots of these podcaster type people out there in the cannabis space. I said, and then I, started hearing about how YouTube in April of 2018 purged their entire site of anything having to do with cannabis. Max Simon from greenflower.com, which was a great website that I found when I had my medical card. They're out of California, and they produce some great educational content with California experts, people from Oaksterdam University. It's where I saw Steve D'Angelo for the first time from the Last Prisoner Project. And sure enough, in April of 2018, 250,000 subscribers, pulled them, shut it off. Bye. Needless to say, when I had my first podcast that was made in March of 2018, I wasn't going to put it up on YouTube. Screw that. WeedTube had just started. The WeedTube, it's no longer with us, but the WeedTube was encouraging those that got shut down from YouTube to put their content up, and they did. So I did. It was free, and if it's free, it's always for me. And that's where I posted my first podcast. It grew, and then as it was growing, something happened in the world called the pandemic. I don't know if you've heard of what happened. Yeah. And everybody went home to quarantine and to separate and all that neat stuff, right? And take your little shots or whatever. And I went to my office every day and started using Zoom as a news gathering and content creative tool. And that's why I mentioned StreamYard, because I'm amazed. One of the our correspondents for our news is Thomas Howard from Cannabis Legalization News. He's out of Illinois, and he gets something like 6,500 views of his live show every Sunday. I give him a plug because I give him a lot of credit. He does a great job, but he directs just like you're doing with StreamYard. And I told him, I can't do that. I focus on making eye contact. I focus on some of the things I'm saying. Usually I lose my train of thought because, after all, I've used cannabis since I was 14. But I'm amazed that you can direct and switch and roll commercials and all this stuff. And me, I throw money at things. Now, once I ran out of money, I couldn't do it anymore. So I really marvel at things like what you do and what Thomas does with Cannabis Legalization News. And of course, I digress. So I have absolutely no idea what you would ask me 2 minutes ago.
No, you're fine. And actually, I have a sound guy. So it's either my husband, and right now it's my adult son, who's like in his early 20s, and this is maybe his second show being my sound guy. So
good for him. Hey, look,
it's kind of a wing and a prayer over here. Honestly, I'm glad it looks good.
You do see the trophy. I love how you have it, superimposed in the background. So that was for the sports talk show for kids I co-created and hosted. And I trained kids to be on-camera talent, anchor, voiceover, interview, and only kids could call the show. And we won an Emmy for a sports special that we created. And the sports special category is one of the more competitive categories in the sports media space, if you will. And no one was doing what we had done. And we did it live. And how can you do it live with kids? I go, what are you talking about? You give kids an opportunity. And by the way, anybody who's young enough to be my kid, I call them kid. And by the way, that's pretty much anybody under the age of 46. So that being said, it is amazing when you give a young person an opportunity, they'll blow you away with their ability. You have to treat them with respect, not as a kid, don't treat them as a young human. Give them mentorship, give them guidance, give them an opportunity, and they'll blow you away with their ability. That's all. And get the hell out of the way. Get the hell out of the way, elected officials who are always worried about, well, what about the kids? And what about the gateway? And I'm like, these kids and your kids know more about this product than you do, obviously.
Yeah. Kids are not stupid.
One of these days, I'm going to get in the face of these elected officials, and it's going to be very difficult for me to hold me back.
Awesome. Let them go. Open up. Who let the dogs out?
That's right. Woof, woof.
Well, thank you so much. Let's see. What are we going to do next? We have talked about, can you tell me about the pro cannabis media? How did that come about? And you are the executive producer of We Talk News.
Right. So let's talk about that news show, because it is by far the one thing that I'm most proud of. So when I started with that one podcast, again, I had no idea. I was actually doing like what I call news dabs, and they were basically 3 to 5 minute headline stories about what I found interesting in the world. I've subscribed to something like 50 newsletters in the cannabis industry, and I read them all. And then I pick what I think are interesting stories. And, I was doing it, in 3 minutes. And, then the next thing I know, a few years later, I've got a few other people who wanted to join me. And when the pandemic hit and I went to my office every day, I said, how am I going to survive? Well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And my vision was to build an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in our time. And I feel like I fulfill that vision now every week with our news show that is released on Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern. And it is the compilation of 15 to 16 correspondents from all over the country and Canada. And I'm looking for another European correspondent. I've had a few. I want another one because I do recognize that there's interest there. I'd love somebody from Australia or New Zealand. So ultimately, we will keep building this out because every state, every country, every entity has different rules and regulations. And I find it fascinating when you get 2 or 3 people from in the same industry that have to deal with different rules in their state in order to run a business. And of course, there's no interstate commerce, wink, wink, legally, please. That's another subject you'll get me going on in a minute if you want to ask me about it. But I feel like I fulfill that every week now with my news. And just for the record, okay, I'm a fill-in anchor, not the main anchor. This isn't about me. This is about the news. And I have a very, very talented young female who was an anchor in Boston for the morning news in her 20s when she got fired for appearing in an Adam Sandler movie as an unidentified extra without asking permission from her broadcast bosses. And that story, as it turns out, has helped her build her own brand. I guess having a little exposure with a news show like mine that's had over 1 million views in 3 years. I mean, there's something to be said for that too. Now she is an influencer. Now she has about 110,000 followers on Instagram. Elena Pinto. And I am so fortunate and lucky to have worked with her now for 3 years. And she works for me for 30 minutes a week. She reads the scripts I write for her in 30 minutes. She reads them cold, which is a skill. And by the way, I have that same skill, just for the record. All right. Next week, I'll be filling in for her. So I know that, if people want to see, I still have my fastball as far as reading off a teleprompter goes. That being said, I'd still much prefer to watch Elena do the news because she's, smart, beautiful women. That's who I like to surround myself with as much as possible. And she qualifies, and she's got a great personality. Yes, she's pro cannabis. And more importantly, now she gets paid more money to show up at events than I ever did. And by the way, I don't blame the people who are paying her because I'd much rather have her there than me. I get it. Okay. It's okay. This is what I prefer. I love talking to people and appearing on podcasts and sharing, my experiences because I have a very unique career where I started as a sports guy and now I'm a weed guy and I'm talking about whatever the subjects are. Again, it's been fascinating. And every week when we put this thing out there, and I'll give you a hint, we'll give you breaking news if you don't mind. Okay. After Labor Day, the Weed Talk News Show is going to be called Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto, which is a much nicer, classier, and it tells what we do. Because I've got correspondents in Washington and Oregon, and I've got correspondents in California and Illinois and Missouri and Ohio and New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts, and of course in Washington, D.C. too. And now Virginia. So, I mean, I'm sure I forgot a few of them. But the bottom line is it's truly a coast-to-coast roundup. And I ask my reporters to keep it under 2 minutes. It's a challenge for some of them.
That would be a good one.
Let's just leave it at that. But they learn how to say as much as possible in as few words as possible. They learn how to keep it short and sweet, talk in headline news style. Here's the headline. Here's what happened. Here's the significance of what happened. Next story. And
Awesome.
I want people in the industry in those states because I want them to have insight on what they find interesting, what they find newsworthy in their state, in the industry. So they get to cross-brand their product. So, if Holly was the reporter from, I don't even know what state you're in, but if you were, you would get to say, this is who I am from DAWG Days podcast. reporting for We Talk News. And of course, then we'll be reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. And we are launching an app, a mobile app. And
do you need my resume?
Absolutely. Send it to me. It's Jimmy at Pro Cannabis Media. Not difficult. Just make sure you spell Jimmy right and cannabis right.
This is fantastic. Hey,
Yeah.
I do a tribute to the troops about mid-show. So I am going to do a really quick video, just a tribute to our guys and gals in the military, and we'll be right back.
It's the guts and it's the glory. 100 stripes, 100 stories. It's the Pledge of Allegiance on the 4th of July. It's them handwritten letters from home. It's them sleepless nights alone. It's his newborn baby he left with his wife. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, here's a line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Hey. From the fields of Indiana to the swamps of Louisiana to the golden coast of California, Uncle Sam's the only family he's got. His purple heartbeat won't stop. And his 18th birthday was the day he was born. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, here's the line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on the front line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, pay the ultimate price. Oh. He was the man of the house when he was born. His family is proud but torn. But if you knew him, you would understand. He was raised on how to be brave, just to see the flag still wave. And then he came home with only one hand. 'Cause Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on these front lines. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, he'll pay the ultimate price. Lay down his life. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. March in line, march in line. Hey. Hey.
And welcome back, everyone. At ease, Mr. Jimmy.
It's a great song, by the way. Very impressive. Very rarely do you hear a song for the first time and you're like, oh my God, I love that song. I want to download it. I want to hear it again.
Awesome.
I'm guessing that's a veteran band. Am I right? Or just a message?
Just the message, I believe. I would have to do a little bit of homework on that, but I I really should do some homework on it if I'm going to show it on my show, shouldn't I? I just love that music. So it's just kind of like my go-to.
If you want an A in my class, yeah, you
I
do your due
do.
diligence, okay?
I
You do
do.
just do your background.
You
And
called me out. Oh my God, I was
no, that's
caught.
right. And you got to understand, I have a soft spot for all veterans. I have a dear, dear friend, the retired Colonel Mark Rosengard from the U.S. Rangers that I went to Tufts University with, and he's quite a story. I don't want to get into details because he wouldn't want me to, and then he would probably kill me. So I don't want to do that, all right? Because we still love each other, and I miss him desperately. But he's a great guy. He trained. He was in the trenches and trained in the trenches, and has done quite well in his life. Now working for a defense contractor. Should have been a general. We don't need to get into the reasons why, but it's okay.
Yeah.
He's a good man, always will be, and has tremendous lifelong respect from me and everybody he's touched in his life. And I'm going to give you one more veteran. Okay, I use this all the time. So here, when you get a chance to be in the trenches in news and document the first adult use legal sale of cannabis in your home state of Massachusetts, and you interview a guy by the name of Stephen Mandilli, and you realize once he told me his story, I said, oh my God, Stephen, you're going to be the answer to a trivia question for the rest of your life. Who was the first? A veteran and someone who came home with PTSD. Pick a reason, any reason. Trauma is part of the deal. And he was ready to take his own life when his wife handed him a joint and said, before you do that, smoke this. Change his life.
Wow.
Save his life. And now he goes before Congress and testifies about the importance of allowing the veterans access to medical cannabis references and checkups at the VA. And that is a goal. And you know what? They're getting closer and closer. How this country treats our veterans is one of the many things that disgust me about our elected officials. So, semper fi, semper fi, and all that neat stuff. And God bless America and all the people who served us out there in defense of our country and our ideals. It's one of those things that someone who grew up in the protest era, and it's like the Vietnam War, okay? Yeah. But I always embrace the people who came home from it. And I even came out with a guy the other night at a bar, 85-year-old Vietnam veteran. He was in the Tet Offensive. He was telling me these stories, and I was like, whoa. Wow. Very, very impressive. So again, that's my thing about the veterans. Another reason why I'm really excited, I know how we connected through Citizen TV, and excited to be working alongside and with those people too, and want to keep waving the flag because we're all in this together. We really are. Oh
yeah,
and we're all human, and we're all we're not perfect beings, no matter how hard we try to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Citizen Green TV. I'm there like this is a match made in heaven. I'm a disabled combat veteran, and I'm a cannabis advocate. So it was made for me. This is where I'm supposed to be.
100%. And I'll be.
I'm not really sure how I got here, but I'm here talking to the godfather of podcasting and on Citizen Green TV. So
if that sticks, Holly, I'm going to come looking for you. Okay. Just to give you a big hug. All right. Trust me. All right. I'm a lover, not a fighter. What can I tell you? That's who I am. That's how.
Well, that's how I introduced you to my son. He's there like, so who's coming on the show today? And I said, Mr. Jimmy Young, and he's been in the industry. He teaches people how to do podcasting, and he's like a no joke media guy. And he's like the godfather of podcasting. So we need to pull ourselves together here.
I love it. I wrote down no joke media guy. Okay. and godfather of podcast of how about cannabis podcasting? Because I mean Rogan's kind of the guy when it comes to this podcasting. One of these days, in fact, we're getting closer to it, I'll be honest. One of these days I will go on his show. just because I know who his producer is. I can certainly sell the reason why, and sharing the fact that not only did he go to the same high school as I did, okay, and he's 10 years younger than me, okay, but we were born in the same hospital in Newark, New Jersey. Now that's bizarre, right? I mean, come on. I grew up in Newton. He had to move to Newton. I had to move to Newton, right? And 10 years behind me, and just kind of weird. That's all.
It's strange. There's something weird going on with the cosmos right now, and everything's just kind of intersecting and coming together, and it's exciting times.
Are you talking about the New York cosmos? Oh, no. You're just talking about the cosmos. Okay. Everything goes back to sports with me, Holly. Okay. I'm sorry. It's just where my brain has always been. It's always been with my heart. And I found a very interesting thing. I found out just because you are a sports fan does not mean you are a supporter of cannabis. And just because you are a supporter of cannabis does not make you a sports fan. So it's been kind of enlightening for me, just because, okay, it was always a part of my life when I was into sports and athletics. Okay.
Right.
And I do think, while everybody recognizes it's not a performance enhancing, I don't like to refer to it as a drug, performance enhancing tool. A tool. Okay. I played the best soccer game of my life in high school when I was under the influence of cannabis, and I was playing with a strained knee ligament, and I had the trainer tape it up so that it was bent in a position that didn't hurt. So I ran my ass off the whole game and played out of my mind. I guess I was out of my mind, but I didn't notice the knee until well after. And then, of course, I iced it up. But still, it's just one of those weird stories that I share about the journey that I've had.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate, grateful. I can't believe I've lived as long as I have, and have had the experiences I've had, and met the people I've had, and still have amazing stories. I love to drop this one, but I'm not. I don't know if I should share it or not, just because of who he is. But I know one day I'll run into Jerry Seinfeld again, and I'll say, "Do you remember in 1986 when you visited?"
He's my idol.
When you were in the backseat of the car that my ex-wife Renee was driving, and she pulled out a joint, and we all got high in the car and went up to LL Bean on a Sunday night at 11 o'clock and went through the hat section. He's going to remember that, because he was also with another comedian actor named Larry Miller, who, the two of them, I mean, sometimes you're in a situation where you laugh so hard your sides hurt. And granted, we were all under the influence. Okay, granted, we were relaxed, we were having fun, but we were in the hat section at LL Bean, and these two guys were doing the Elmer Fudd imitations. And I mean, I'm telling you, it was one of the funniest 45 minutes to an hour I've ever had in my life with these two guys. Very fortunate. And whether Jerry admits it or not, one day I will never forget that story. And also, the executive producer Carol Leifer was in the car with us now too. So we're going to throw them all under the bus now. Now it's out there. It's in the podcast world. Go ahead, share it, like it, subscribe to it, whatever you need to do. It's true. I don't have to. That's the amazing thing. I don't have to BS people. Everybody thinks, "Oh, you're such a great salesperson." I say, I'm like, no. I tell the truth. I'm transparent. I'm comfortable with the fact that I've screwed up my life a little bit. I really have. But guess what? I've had an amazing time. The book I'm writing eventually will be fun, because that last chapter is how I made my first million, which I haven't yet. And I'm writing it right now. And I'm so convinced now that it's going to happen if I live so long. But I do think it's going to happen. And it's all because I believe in the cause. It really is.
Oh, awesome. So let's end the show with a home run. I'm trying to tie in the sports.
That was good. I got it. I picked up on that. That was good. That's it. Go ahead. Home run.
So what would you like to leave the podcast with? What golden nugget would you like to leave us with?
Acapulco gold nugget? Oh, so here's my nugget. And it's something I'm going to actually give credit to Aaron Smith, the executive director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, because I'm friends with Aaron, known him for 6 years. And I was at a membership drive event of his for the NCIA at the very beginning of the New York market, and it was in Albany. And I want to say it had to be 4 years ago. It had to be. You know, the whole pandemic is completely screwed up. Was it 2 years, 4 years ago? I can't, right? It was, let's say it's pre-pandemic, because I don't remember anybody in masks, okay? And he said to the group there, if you understand the industry and you're passionate about the plant, we all have an obligation to educate those that aren't as enlightened as we are. We all have an obligation when you're checking out at the supermarket. And I use cannabis dispensary swag bags for my shopping bags. Okay. Okay. And needless to say, you know, you get a variety of grocery baggers, right? Sometimes they're 14, like my first job was a grocery bagger. And then you got the, you know, the older retirees in their 70s or even 80s sometimes. And, you know, they see the cannabis and everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion about this plant. 70% of Americans think it should be legalized. Okay. Up to 90% recognize the medicinal qualities of the plant. It's all out there. There's so many facts and surveys. And all I'm telling people is this: learn, read, subscribe, like, and share. Pro Cannabis Media, PCM TV, coming to an app near you. But more importantly, I read 50 newsletters a week. There's some great journalists out there covering this industry now. People like Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report, Alex Halperin from Weed Week out in California. For a long time, Bruce Barcott was the editor of Leafly, and his book, Weed the People, was one of the first books I read, and I was blown away when I heard about, no, it's not a drug issue, it's a race issue. Learn about it. Learn the history. Understand that this plant medicine was vilified in the 1930s because money and the people who controlled money after the stock market collapsed, people like Mr. Mellon, Mr. Carnegie, Mr. DuPont, and Mr. Hearst feared not only the pulp industry, the hemp industry impacting the pulp industry. Heaven forbid that we actually accepted it back then, so we wouldn't have the amount of disease and pollution and climate change that we have now that we're dealing with. Okay, all because of the fact that we had nepotism and we put a racist named Harry Anslinger in charge of the first Federal Narcotics Bureau in 1930. He banned cannabis. He got that act passed, the Cannabis Tax Act passed in 1937. But one thing I learned within the last few months, and I share this with everyone because it is not a known fact. Somebody who did over 500 interviews didn't know that Harry Anslinger married the Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Mellon's niece, and got that job in 1930 and held it until 1962. And he was the guy behind Reefer Madness, producing that propaganda movie that everybody laughed at. Isn't it funny? No, it's not, because it vilified the plant at the expense of immigrants and people who are not of my color in this country.
Yeah.
And it has to stop.
Yeah.
And the fact that we filled our jails 4 times more Black people than white people, and both races use it the same percentage, if that doesn't expose the depth of racism in this country, it should. It really should. And I'm not going to go politics here, but it's time that we change the direction of what I fear is coming. And it goes back to social media. It really does. I'm sorry, but it does.
It does.
Did I do that? Hey, did I close that out all right? Did I do okay with that?
Holy cow, that was a home run.
Okay. At least you gave me an A. I'll give you an A as well, because I thought you did a great job. And nobody, by the way, it's tough to handle my personality. You did a great job.
It's been a lot of fun. I'll have you back in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to talk to your son. What do you think of that?
I would love that. I think he would love that as well. He has a presence and he has a good little voice, or he has a little man voice, and, you know, he sounds good and looks good on screen. So yeah, absolutely.
Biased, but you should be. What state are you in?
We're in Wyoming.
Why are you in Wyoming?
I know. Well, I'm a tribal member out here on the
Say
reservation.
no more. Do you know Mary Jane Oatman?
That name is familiar to me. Is she like
Indigenous
an
cannabis
Indian
business.
country advocate?
She's like the president of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry.
I've invited her to come on, and maybe you could put in a good word for me.
That can happen immediately.
Okay, Jimmy, you're awesome. You're my hero, dude. You are the godfather of podcasts.
I went from a hero and
Cannabis
godfather
podcast.
and no joke media guy. I love that.
You're a no joke media guy. Well, come back and see us real soon. And that's our show for today. Stay safe out there, everyone. Until next time.